Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you want to know something, ask Solomon.
That was his middle name.
Yeah, Solomon, Google Snipes. Welcome back to Pasteurized. We're in 1 Kings as promised, and we're going to be looking at the life and kingship of Solomon. First, we're reaching back just a little bit into David's last days. What we got?
He very old.
Yeah, 70. It seems
That's-
old. Doesn't
It just says he is.
That's what it
advancing
says in
years.
verse
Yeah.
1. King David was very old.
and I've read that, but we also know we know his timeline, right? He died when
Yeah.
he was 70 years old.
Right.
And Moses says, hey, look, that's kind of the lifespan. If you go back to Psalm
90.
90, yes. 80 if you're really healthy.
Right. He even says that.
Yeah.
70 or maybe even 80
Maybe
years.
even 80, if you're really lucky. So, this is, from our perspective, 70 feels a little not so old, but,
The age that he has is not where I tend to get hung up on. The fact that it said that he couldn't get warm, that makes sense. But the fact that they said, let's go find a young woman, and also described her as beautiful, but then makes a point to make sure that we know that they did not, consummate anything. So I get a little bit hung up on that. I'm like, why did it have to be that way? And what in the world?
I've said it too.
And-
Did David not have enough wives?
Yeah,
I mean, he couldn't have found anybody already
exactly.
there.
Bathsheba was not doing it for him anymore.
Oh, man. Hate
must
to
have been
say,
too
it, say it
old,
like
too.
that, right?
I was talking to Tiana a little bit about it, and it's like, well, maybe they mentioned her beauty just simply because she comes into play later, and
Right.
perhaps that's the extent of it. Yeah, it is weird. It's weird that they sought after a beautiful young woman throughout all the territory of Israel, and her name was not beautiful, FYI, Abishag.
So,
But-
did y'all track far enough to see that she ends up with Solomon? Did I
no.
misread that? I mean, this is getting ahead of us now. Solomon's brother asked for her. Remember
Yeah,
that part?
Right. Yep.
And that was his undoing. Solomon's response was, does he also want the kingdom?
Yeah.
I mean, you asked for that for him as well. This was too. But pretty sure Solomon ends up with her. Now, maybe I dreamed that, and here I am in front of God, everybody saying it. But
Yeah, well, we'll come across it if it is.
I think you dreamed it.
I don't remember, but it's
Where-
been a long time since I've been king, so
Yeah.
I will say that.
That could have been a detail that was in Second Chronicles or something.
That's what I mean. We'll get there.
Yeah.
If Randall's going to look up all these cross references that are listed
I
at the
don't know.
bottom.
At
of
this
us.
point, I might just let it go.
Yeah. So anyway, you've got David. The fact that David is dying and he dies, then you've got the sons that are like, okay, well, this is my chance. Now I'm gonna try to see if I can get the throne.
Right.
And so Adonijah is the first one, and he's older. We see that he is older than Solomon. We also have gotten a clue that Solomon is the one that is chosen. So Adonijah sees the opportunity and he tries to take command. He actually
Right.
gets some people. Here comes Joab again.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And Abiathar, and who else is mentioned? Zadok. Zadok was with Solomon. But anyway, you've got basically some people that are against Solomon meaning that they were supportive of Adonijah.
Right.
Probably saw him being rightful authority and all type of stuff. And then you got Solomon over here. And so some of them are understanding that Solomon is the one who is going to be king. And so they support him. Interesting enough, and we can just try to read between the lines, they're the ones that are not invited to this feast. When Adonijah is making himself king, then these are the ones that are not invited. So they're like, okay, we see where this is going.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at it as, especially when Joab kind of gets lumped into it. I'm like, all right, so this is people wanting to continue David's conquest, but God's plan for Solomon was years of peace. And so obviously we see that Adonijah couldn't be king because he wasn't going to be a peaceful king. But ultimately, we knew God's plan from the beginning was Solomon. So,
But it is interesting that the Shimei is one of the ones that's aligned with Solomon. We would not have guessed that. And maybe he was thinking, okay, well, we'll go with David and keep supporting David because he seems like the good call. But he put his cards in with Solomon.
Well, and so at this time, David was still alive.
Right. Yes.
I mean, he
Yeah.
really had to be careful.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, it does come back, obviously, as we keep going, then we'll see what actually happens. But since Adonijah was kind of forcing the issue, then Nathan and Bathsheba are like, all right, well, we got to force the issue and make sure that this is what is true. The question that comes in my mind was, were they really trying to be deceitful with David, or were they not? Was it really that they already knew that there was a promise, an anointing that was kind of spoken by David to Solomon, or at least to other people, and so it was known and they knew that? Or was it that they were trying to hatch this plan similar to times that we've seen in the past where they're like, okay, we're gonna make sure we get the person that we want on the throne?
It feels very intentional in all aspects to me. It's, plus, what do we know about Joab? This guy is not accidental in anything. Mm-hmm. He's a thinker.
Yeah.
And so he's planning some stuff out, and so he's moving the pieces on the board according to what he thinks should happen.
Yeah. But what about Nathan and Bathsheba? And they're like, okay, you go in first, and then I'll come in after you and I'll confirm your words. I'll kind of add to them.
Well, they got to amp this thing up a little bit, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it was pretty straightforward because they asked, did you announce Adonijah as king?
Yeah.
Or are you going to keep with your oath? And so they obviously knew of some oath that David had made.
Right.
Well, so the issue would be whether or not maybe his mental capacities were kind of fading too. And so they were trying to capitalize on that because he was old, because he was kind of failing, that they're like, oh, do you remember that oath that you said? And he's like, well, I trust you. So yeah, I must have said something like that. And I mean, in all honesty, I tend to think that it was not at least motivated by deception and trying to deceive. It seems like there's enough support to say that there actually was an oath beforehand.
Yeah, I think
Adonijah
was not deceptive.
Yeah, Adonijah even mentioned it too. He was like, I know that's the one that God has chosen. So
yeah, it's the other parties that I felt like were being a little shady.
yeah, for sure. And like you said, trying to get some movement going. They're like, today's got to be the day because people are going to start following him if we don't make this thing happen.
Right.
So they do. And he rides on the king's mule, which clearly has some symbolism behind it. And it allows people to see, okay, this is David's choice.
Yeah.
So,
which is the same thing that Jesus did as he's, descending into Jerusalem too. So also David's choice.
Adonijah rightfully assumes that he has aligned himself against the king, the new King Solomon. And so he does what he can to preserve his life. Solomon tells him if he continues to be a loyal subject, nothing bad's going to happen to him.
it is interesting. I can't remember exactly where we're at as far as in the timeline, but when they go and they grab the horns of the altar, Adonijah is spared at first, but then later on when Joab does the same thing, Joab is not.
Yeah.
And so one thing being that it's a little bit weird that they go in and they grab the horns of the altar to begin with. I mean, the only thing that I can see and make sense of is that that was a plea for mercy. That was, hey, I'm safe. I got base.
Base.
Can't tag me,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Under normal circumstances, you would think that Solomon would not be able to kill Joab, like in the sanctuary, the sanctuary of the temple. Nothing seems to happen. No ramifications from it.
Yeah.
Now, again, Joab was guilty, so
Right. I
He
think
was
innocent
guilty.
blood would have a different effect.
yeah.
Right. And so Joab's death was actually putting things back in order.
Right.
Yeah, Adonijah, though, he gives him mercy, at least at first. So, yeah, chapter 2. We've got David instructing Solomon, giving him some wisdom. And basically, one of the things that the first few verses basically, be strong, show yourself a man. He's like, man up, dude.
Yeah.
Because he is young.
Yep.
Solomon says as much later on. But he says, hey, keep walking, keep the charge of the Lord your God, walk in his ways, keep his statutes, his commandments, his rules, his testimonies, as is written in the law of Moses, and prosper in all you do, and wherever you turn. The Lord will establish his word that he spoke concerning me, and so on and so forth. And, you know, I think it's good. It's good for us to see that. It's good that David is pouring into his son, trying to say, hey, this is what success looks like.
Right.
It's not go gather some wives.
Right.
It's not go defeat these people. He's like, no, keep the law of God. And that's how you will prosper.
Yeah. And he defines the prosperity in accordance to God's promise of somebody to succeed after
Right.
him. It's if we do it right, then we get to keep doing it. And if we don't do it right, we don't get to keep going. And so I feel like, man, that's a good word for us, right?
Yeah.
If we like what we're doing for God, and if we just maintain his commandments, we get to keep doing it.
It's interesting too that he just even says, hey, these other people that we're mentioning, as far as these people that there's some justice that still needs to happen with them. I'll leave it up to your discretion.
Right. Yeah. You're smart.
You can do.
You know what to do.
Yeah, you can do what you want.
Yeah. But don't let them die a natural death.
Yeah.
Make it bloody, especially when it comes to Joab.
And then David dies,
Yeah, reigned for 40 years, the ripe old age of 70.
which Solomon is also 40 years, correct?
He
I remember.
best guess was he came to the throne around 20. Could have been as old as 30, but certainly not earlier than 20.
Solomon reigned for 40 years as well.
Yeah. And there's where we get into Adonijah asking for Abishag.
Yeah.
We just call her Abby.
So apparently it was a wild request,
Well,
mainly because, so she wasn't a queen because they didn't consummate any marriage, but she was obviously someone that they trusted and looked up to in the king's court.
yeah.
And so for Abishag to come in and be like, hey, can I have the king's caretaker? Solomon took it as, you want the queen? So might as well have the whole kingdom. So,
And then
it was
it's not without priors too. If you think back when Absalom came in and overtook, there was something
with the concubines.
visual there that he was proclaiming within that.
Yeah.
I was like,
Well, it's funny to me too, just in the fact that my mind goes to why in the world would Bathsheba actually go ahead and make this request? Like you got to consider, okay, either she has no clue what she's actually asking, or if she does know, then it makes you wonder, okay, well, why? Why would she? And even put it in terms of, I have one small request to make of you. And that's when Solomon, when she does ask, that's when Solomon's like, are you kidding me?
yeah.
Why in the world? He's like, Mom, seriously, what are you doing? You might as well give the kingdom, the whole kingdom to him as well. Based on Solomon's response, we know that this was a plea for the throne. This was a ploy. So whether Bathsheba was deceived somehow or whatever, regardless, she does in fact make the request, and Solomon wasn't having it, of course. And so he says, he shall be put to death today. We're done with this. No more.
Yeah. Then we get to Abiathar. He removed him. Again, that was part of the entire coup incident with Adonijah and Joab. And so Abiathar, he doesn't kill him. He just says, you're done. Go home. So he's stripped of all of his authority or power or prestige. And
well, I think it's good to note too within that, in verse 27, he expelled him from being a priest, and it says, thus fulfilling the word of the Lord that he has spoken concerning the house of Eli and Shiloh. And so just the noting that God is faithful to his word. It may come later, but God is faithful in his timing, and in his ways. He is faithful to what he has spoken.
If we do, fast forward to 2 Chronicles, the line of Eli kind of becomes the priests in the northern kingdom. And well, I mean, what we know about the northern kingdom is not good. So
it falls much faster than the southern. Yeah.
So I mean, you can take that for what you will. They're basically a line of illegitimate priests. But Jeremiah is from that line, so God still used it.
Yeah, there's some good.
Joab, done. Finally.
No more of that guy. So, I mean, one of the things that we are seeing is that Solomon is basically taking out all the people that would potentially go against him. And we, in some ways, we kind of understand that. Like we say, okay, well, that's a smart move. It's got to be done. Now, of course, now we see ourselves as more civilized, and we're like, well, why would you kill him? But,
maybe
still.
Prisons weren't as...
we're going to see in a little bit why you kill all of them.
Yes, you're right. And that's
when
the characters
alive,
come,
next thing you know,
they flee, and then they show up again.
They show up again later. It's like, you missed me, sucker. And so this is the opposition that you can only trust them so much. Especially with Joab. I mean, you can't trust him when he is on your side. So
with Joab, and then with Shimei later, when he goes after his servants, and then because of that, he's breaching the vow that he made with Solomon. He said, Solomon said, if you stay in the city, then you can be safe. You will live. But the day that you go out, you're done. And so he does. He goes against it. Shimei does, and so he has him killed. And then in verse 46, before we get into chapter 3, it says, so the kingdom of it was established in the hand of Solomon, and that's where I'm getting the whole, Solomon took care of all the people that were against him.
Right.
Finally done.
Well, I see it as, it's kind of similar to the thing that David did, except for David wasn't looking out for his own kingdom. He was looking out for the Lord's kingdom. And maybe Solomon's doing the same thing, but he knows that these are the things that he's got to do. So it's always been interesting to me that he sends Benaiah to kill each of these people. So I'm like, Benaiah must have been a bad dude, right? Especially going at Joab. He's definitely a warrior. Maybe he's a little long in the tooth by this point.
Sure. Yeah.
And maybe Benaiah's not going along.
And Joab may have been as well, I imagine. But
chapter 3.
Yep. So we see the very first, at least mentioned wife of Solomon comes from a foreign country. And so that comes up later with his downfall. He marries Pharaoh's daughter as some sort of allegiance, or alliance rather, with Egypt.
So here's what's interesting. When I read that, I think, okay, these guys are going to be copacetic now, right? But then you find later on that his enemies flee to Egypt in order to basically gain strength and eat at the king's table of Egypt, the known enemy of Solomon. Maybe because of Joab or David or Saul or whoever, but still an enemy of the state is found care with the king of Egypt. And I was like, well, what kind of allegiance is that? Yeah, a side note, but there it is.
Yeah, we will run into it later as far as Egypt and all that. So that's one of the things when we fast forward to those times, I do remember writing down, it's like Pharaoh almost seems like he's playing both sides. Like he's going to be politically aligned to everyone. So he's given a daughter to Solomon. So he's trying to have some peace there, but he's also given his wife's sister, I guess, Pharaoh's wife's sister to the one who comes against Solomon. I can't remember who it was exactly, but we'll get there.
I may be wrong. Maybe it's Rehoboam that he comes against. Solomon's son?
No, I mean, Solomon, there is a guy that comes and marries Pharaoh's daughter. Well, marries who is that? Help me out here.
No, that's,
these family connections. Yeah. Somebody in Pharaoh's family, his sister-in-law. There we go. He gives his sister-in-law to her.
We'll get there. It'll straighten up here in a minute.
Yeah, it will. So anyway, chapter 3 with the marriage, then it's kind of contrastive to later on. So we get mentioned the first foreign wife of Solomon, but then we're seeing that they're still sacrificing in the high places. And this is part of kind of what leads into Solomon building and wanting to build the house of God. Right. And so within all of this, we're seeing a very big contrast with right now in Solomon's early reign to the very end of his reign when he's accumulated all these foreign wives, and now all of a sudden he's building these high places again, but they're for his wives' gods. And it's very clear too, scripture is putting it right now, he's walking in the statutes of his father.
With the exception of.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The high places.
The high places.
Yeah. This is where he also says, I feel like he's showing some humility, although I'm but a little child. I don't know how to go out or come in is the way this version puts it, as far as when God is saying, hey, ask what you want.
Yeah, well, this is a beautiful chapter of Solomon's life where he's before God and has, basically a blank check. And he asks for that which honors God. He wants to just do the best job he can as a king for the people of God. I was like, it's a selfless request, right? Obviously, God sees it that way and responds with a lot of generosity.
Well, it's reminiscent, at least reminds me of the seek first the kingdom and all these things will be added unto you, that he was seeking, at least in this particular case, let me rule your people with justice and with a fairness and lead them, the way I see it, lead them in the way that you would have me lead them. And so in the same way that if we seek first the kingdom, then we'll realize what is important and what's not.
That's right.
Later on. And God blesses. He blesses that faithfulness, even with creature comforts.
Yeah.
And in this case, in Solomon's case, it's peace, it's prosperity.
It made me think of where does true wisdom come from? And it comes from the Spirit of the Lord. And, Paul talks about that in 2 Corinthians, that, no unbeliever can fathom the things of God and know true wisdom. And so, we see the evidence of Solomon having the Spirit of God in his life and living with him to be able to, carry out these judicial decisions that are beyond what most people probably had to deal with. And so I just was really, really thinking about, just like David sought after God's heart, here we see Solomon, going after God's heart, not just in keeping his commandments, but in being able to live like the Lord would want him to live. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the thing for all of us. We have access to the Spirit of God and to know true wisdom. And so we can ask God for the very same thing that Solomon was asking for.
Right.
Yeah.
Tendency, I think, in the human nature is to want to appeal to God in this way so that we can get all the other things, which is a misplace of what's important, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just another form of idolatry in which we want to use God and not trick him necessarily, but we want to appeal to him so that we can have the stuff that we want.
Yeah, it's like in John when he's saying, Jesus is saying that I'll give you whatever you ask in my name. Mm-hmm. And we're like, awesome, this is going to be good.
Rory.
Yeah. But we have to understand that is not the blank check.
No, that's right.
So,
Well, and I think this is why we're seeing God get, because Solomon asked for what he truly wanted, and it wasn't all that stuff. And so here's a safe avenue, and I think God finds those safe avenues still within humanity. There's not a ton of them, but the safe avenues that he can just dump on and know that it's going to get funneled rather than strained, right? And so it's the goal in our hearts from my takeaway from this passage is to tune our hearts to that, where it's like, it can't be about the stuff or the whatever comes in addition to, right? It has to consistently be about the kingdom. Now, Solomon's downfall was not the gold and the houses and the riches and all that. I think, he did a great job of masterminding all of that, and it seemed like he really spent a lot of money. So it was a funnel through process for, big government Solomon. His downfall obviously was the women.
Yeah.
And so there's where the chink in his armor rested. It wasn't in the finances.
Well, and I think too, here's something where God can show off how great he really is. And so when he gives, Solomon wisdom to rule in his light and glory, then God is showing all the rest of the nations, this is what my kingdom is supposed to look like. And so when it comes to the goal of being like, hey, Israel's going to be different than all the other nations, and you're going to, be a light, and all the other people are going to desire to be, included in this. This is the epitome of that with Solomon. And so, God is showing off big, not just in giving him a brilliant mind and understanding and all the wisdom, unknown to everybody else, but also with the riches. And so you got smarts and brains and the wealth to go along with it.
It's it becomes a catch-22, I think, in our lives. If we seek God, the riches are not a big deal. If we seek the riches, then it's becomes the problem, right? It's and so you find that whenever you're seeking God, then He can freely pour out, but it's not a big deal. It's not a thing even. And so the goal of, like you're saying, the goal was never the end goal is never the riches.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think one case in point, most people, I can't remember the exact statistic, but when people win large sum lottery winnings, then a great percentage of them will actually be bankrupt after a while. And you think when we stop and we think, oh man, what could I do with $100,000 or $300,000 or $5 million or something? We're like, man, that feels like more than we could spend. But at the same time, obviously people get used to it because all of a sudden, before you know it, they're filing for bankruptcy, and because they haven't been able to figure out what to do in the right ways.
Hard to have a vision for finances that doesn't include self-improvement.
Yeah.
This is where I think we tend to get our hiccups. What were you saying?
I was just thinking, along these same lines, with God giving Solomon all this wisdom, like you even said on Sunday, the end was not, hey, look at all the stuff that God has given me. It's, hey, everything in life is futile. And the main thing is to fear God and keep his commandments. Yeah. And David actually writes that in Psalm 19, he's saying the law of the Lord is more precious to me than gold, silver, and anything. And the only desire is to be able to know and live out the commands of the Lord. And so I would pray that, this is kind of what Solomon was seeking after here.
Yeah.
And that he came to that understanding too, after experiencing it all.
And if you really believe that, then that's going to make your life a lot different.
Yeah.
That's really the case, it all, basically everything that we've been talking about kind of comes all together. The seek first in the kingdom and how we treat riches and all that type of stuff. Yeah. It's all there.
We try to teach it to our kids. You got to value integrity more than money. Because those are the two that are going to conflict with each other if we're not careful. It's like, are you going to treat people fairly, or are you try to get as much as you can get from somebody? And it's there's always going to be some issue of integrity involved when it comes to finances. And if you don't value integrity, then if you're not careful, then the gold becomes the God.
Mm-hmm. So in chapter 3, we get not only is Solomon in the prayer for wisdom when he responds to God, saying, yes, I want wisdom to rule well. We see the effects of it too immediately. It jumps into a case in point,
right?
Where the two women come and they're like, hey, this baby's mine. No, this baby's mine. And so you have to think, was this just never done before? Yes, he's smart. And we've probably used this as parents a lot.
Sure.
Be like, all right, well, neither of you going to have it. Mm-hmm. But we see it as a prime example. And like Josh said, the renown of God is seen within Solomon's life, the wisdom that he has. And people are like seeing, okay, this is God's doing. This is beyond just who this man is.
So within this story, I wanted more. I mean, if you find yourself thinking, well, good night. Okay, yeah, you found out who the real mom is. Now what you going to do to the one that's trying to kidnap this child and or have it killed? It's like, there's got to be some follow through on this. Can't be like, all right, we're good. It's her baby. Y'all can leave now. I was like, no, you get to stay back. We're not done talking. This is wretched of an individual. Like, this is not a person you want hanging out in the kingdom. So I'm sure there was activity beyond it. I would like to see a little more conclusion in some of this story.
So chapter 4, we'll read all the names that are listed here. Yeah. We've got a bunch of people that are listed and all the positions that are there. And obviously it's useful to know, that yes, the kingdom was truly Solomon's to command and everything. God is faithful within all of that. We see a lot of these people that are mentioned. But then the second half of, after all of that, then we get into the sheer scope of Solomon's wisdom and wealth. Basically, they ate, they drank, they were happy. The kingdom was expanded, like you mentioned on Sunday again, to the greatest extent it had been or ever would be. There's peace on all sides. They lived in safety. And one of the things that I kept seeing is they let nothing be lacking. This is good times. This is golden age.
Yep.
Yeah. They found in the 18th or the 19th century, they found a stele in what is modern day Turkey of a king that lived around the same time as Solomon. They're saying 8th century BC. So it basically had a description on it that was very similar to this and for their kingdom. And they were like, this is basically the pinnacle of every kingdom. Like, they wanted to live in this golden age. We look at it and we're like, that's kind of cool. Yeah, everybody's happy. But like, this was the best time Israel has ever had.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And my guess is we'll ever, short of, Jesus establishing the 1,000-year reign, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even just like when you stop and you think about it, not only is the wealth, but also when we get into Solomon and everything that's described as far as the sacrifices. I mean, it's hard for us to fathom even just that number of animals, let alone the ones that, that's just how many he's sacrificing, let alone all the others that are around. And, the horses and the stalls and cities that are basically I think, isn't it mentioned at some point, it's the city of the stalls? It's like there's this whole town of just horse stalls.
I mean, it had to be.
Yeah.
It was extravagance beyond what we are used to thinking about. I mean, this is close to U.S. government standard right here. I mean, really, as far as just absolute.
Let's just say Japan, just because they seem like they're so cool with their technology and stuff.
Well, I'm just thinking this is, back when they weren't running debt too, they were still able to pull it off. And we're only doing it because we were printing money and it's monopoly, and people still think it's okay, and we're going through life like everything's okay, but it's a house of cards. So not so much here. It was backed by they guesstimated Solomon by the end of his life would have amassed 500 tons of gold.
Yeah,
it's outrageous.
That is definitely within the trillions.
Yeah.
In today's standard.
Outrageous.
Well, and even just like you mentioned too, the silver becoming basically like rocks,
yeah.
like dirt. Yeah. I mean, any of us would say, yeah, I'll go ahead and take the silver.
Yeah. Stop playing with the silver. Come on inside.
Yeah.
The kids kept a silver collection instead of rock collection.
Yeah.
That's adorable.
They had silver polishers.
And on top of that, Solomon was basically the ancient Google.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you want to know something, ask Solomon.
That was his middle name.
Yeah. Solomon Google Snipes. Maybe that last one wasn't all right. I don't know.
It would be Davidson.
David's son. Yes, you're right.
Or Bar David.
Yeah.
So chapter 5 and chapter 6 kind of taken together. So there's, first of all, preparations. And so Solomon, there's Hiram, or however you pronounce his name, of Tyre. Solomon sends to him and he's like, yeah, man, this is great. I've been waiting for this day kind of feel. He's praising God along with Solomon, and he's happy to do it. And so he's sending all this wood basically over to Solomon to build the temple. And Solomon is basically just kind of providing for him as far as, yeah, we got food in abundance. We'll send it to you and your people. And so there's all the preparations for the temple, and then Solomon building the temple in chapter 6.
A quick side note here that may be a reach, but we're known for them. Chapter 5, verse 3, he's talking about David was able to build a temple to honor the Lord his God. And then you get to verse 4, but now the Lord my God has made me secure on all fronts. And it's not a different God. The difference is the personal experience. And so we saw previously Solomon having his own personal experience with God here. And so it just kind of underscores the necessity of that for the generational pass down. It can't be my God that my kids rely on. It has to be theirs, right? And they, at some point, it has to be their relationship and their personal experience with God that's driving their bus. Basically, it can't be what we did or are doing.
Yeah, it's also interesting in the same verse that it says because of the warfare with which his enemies surrounded him, and it's like the way I was looking at it or wondering, it seems like God has been doing this thing, but yet this thing, it is the will of God for this temple to be built. He's like, yes, I will bless you in this way, but it'll be your son, but not you because of all this warfare. But yet this warfare was also part of God's will. Yeah. And so it's just this unique area where I think we just kind of have to look and we have to take it into consideration. I don't think it was for us to really figure it out necessarily, but at the same time, we see the complexity of the will of God, if you will, within this.
And the division of duties, we've already seen that in Israel. It's not that the Levites were better people than the other people. There's a division of duty. And so now they've been separated out for their task. And so David also had a task.
Yeah.
It was like Sikkim. He was the Sikkim dog.
Yeah.
And Solomon was the
you and your peeps.
Nice pet dog.
Entourage.
Well, and it set up Solomon's reign to be so peaceful because David had already conquered everybody.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And we see the fact that he knows his mission there in verse 5. So David did his part, like you guys said, right. Your son, whom I will set on your throne, shall build the house for my name. So Solomon, in preparing for the temple and desiring it and everything, having that encounter with God on a personal level, it's all in preparation for the building of it. So
can't wait to meet David. I think he'll be a cool dude.
You just want to watch the DVDs of all the battles?
I'd like to see something better than what's out there right now.
That's true.
Somebody was asking me the other
goodness.
day, they're telling me what David looked like. I said, no, I don't think so. I mean, go back and read scripture. This dude was a brute. I mean, it didn't tell us his size or height, but I'm telling you this from the way it reads, he was a man of war, a fierce battler. I mean, you're not going to look at him and think, I can't tell if that's a guy or a girl. Mm. And the dude that they got playing David in the whatever show that's on right now.
Oh, yeah.
He could go either way.
Oh, man.
It's like, wow. I think I'm right on this. I think that David will be a very manly man.
We look at it more from we read in a lot to his emotional side, where he's writing all these things, which Solomon is too. He's writing all these songs and proverbs, and typically when you look at that, you're like, okay, well, that's that's more sensitive type thing, yeah. And yet
then he cuts a couple hundred foreskins, and so I was like, maybe he's not so sensitive.
Yeah. I wonder if they're basing his character off of the Michelangelo sculpture of David, which in the Renaissance, everybody looked very feminine.
Yeah. No, you should go watch the show. They're not based off of that. That would be an improvement.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I watched the first part of the first episode. That's all further I got.
Yeah.
Anyway, chapter 6 builds the temple.
The temple was 2 times the size of the tabernacle.
And Solomon's house was bigger than that.
Let me read into this. The temple was supposed to be better than the tabernacle because it would be a permanent dwelling place for the Lord. But ultimately, it was not a permanent dwelling place of the Lord because now we are the temples. It got better and better, and now it's even better than it was.
So keep going. Yeah. In heaven, will we still be the temple?
It'll be the inner sanctuary, like where
all of heaven is the city of God.
Yeah, essentially. And because we're there and God dwells within us and we abide in Him, it's all
yeah.
It's as close as we can get.
And it'll be improved because we'll be experiencing God without the sin nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it comes down to in the same way that you cannot get away from the sun when Revelation talks about how there's no need for a sun because the Lamb is the light, then I think that's the part of it.
I just, like with every covenant that God has made, there's been a dwelling place for him. And so with Abraham, they had built altars. And so with his sons and grandsons. And then when it comes to Moses, a new covenant is made with Israel and they build the tabernacle. And now we have the Davidic covenant and there's a temple now. Eventually there's going to be a new covenant that, Jeremiah and Ezekiel talk about. And then God sends His Spirit. And now we're the temple.
And then step after that is He's coming to earth to hang out.
Yeah. And then the whole realm is His temple.
Yes, that's right. Interesting times ahead.
Which, we also don't let it be lost the fact that that's what it was in the beginning. And so God is one-upping Himself in a sense where, there's the original creation and then there was the fall, and with the renewal of all that, then it will be better than it was in the first place.
Yeah. Former things have passed away, and you
yeah.
have a new earth.
Yep.
So 7 years, yeah, he's got, we can read about the size and everything that was laden with gold, basically. And then Solomon builds his own palace after that, and he spends 13 years, and his house is bigger, which we understand. He's got all them wives to the house.
It is
He got a whole city just for his wives.
substantially bigger.
Yeah.
God, you got a pretty modest house. But my house.
I mean, when you take in the height consideration, it is
No kidding.
absolutely astronomical. I mean,
Yeah.
if you just had one level, it's 11,000 square foot home, but with a 45 high ceiling, you could have 3 stories. Cube footage was 506,000, whereas the temple's cube footage was 121.
I mean, I don't know that we should make a big deal necessarily about, God has a smaller house than Solomon, because I don't think that's the point, other than the fact that Solomon he sought to build the house of God first, and we'll see that later. But then with Solomon's palace, that was part of the grandeur. It was part of the renown.
Yes.
Because so it wasn't even just his wisdom, but it was also the riches and the wealth and the blessing of God, and everybody could see that. And so then we get, as we go on, and the Queen of Sheba, and she comes and
as we read it, the lines blur some as far as Solomon's building of his temple and the temple of the Lord. There is a blurring of lines there because it kind of goes back and forth a little bit in the descriptions, and so it.
He named his house, so we should probably do the same.
I got mine's.
Get back to ranches.
Mine's named Sanford and Son. And so it goes on just to describe so much stuff that he's building. And so this is the building phase, right? And it just, again, all of this is just to give us a picture. God's painting a very detailed picture for us of just a gargantuan expression of the vastness that God has poured out on the nation of Israel during Solomon's reign.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting to note, too, that a lot of Solomon's blessing, yes, it was for his own relationship with God and how he, didn't respond by saying, God, give me riches when he asked him. But a large portion of it was because of David's faithfulness, too. Yeah. And even just the way that it's worded, do the same thing that your father David did and walk in the same ways. I think that's a big point, that we can't expect, if we are not faithful, we can't expect the next generations after us to be faithful and or experience the same blessings from God. In chapter 8, the ark is brought into the temple. So they finally bring the ark in, and that's when, things really break loose. The presence of God filled the place. It was a dark cloud. Solomon is dedicating everything to God in the rightful way. What are we seeing in this specifically?
The prayer is beautiful. I mean, it's consistent. There's some redundancy in it, but he's thinking through every possible scenario and praying over it for the benefit of Israel and the mercy of God. And within that, we also see a little prophecy. When your people are defeated,
and they
turn back to you. It's like, okay, this is going to happen when they sin, because they're going to sin, and they turn back to you. Hear from heaven. When there's drought, that's going to happen. When there's famine, that's going to happen. When there's plague, that's going to happen. Epidemic, outbreak, defeated by other nations. And so he's thinking through every possible scenario in this prayer. And so it's...
the repetition is hear and forgive, hear and forgive, hear and forgive, hear and forgive. Ultimately, this is, as far as the repentance and stuff, this is not even just for forgiveness. One of the things that I see is they long for his presence. That his eyes may be open at night and day toward this house. My name shall be there, that you may listen to the prayer of your servants that they offer in this place. And the hear and forgive is more the presence. It's not so much, okay, let's not feel the wrath of God, so much as it is, no, we know that we need to be near God. We know that we want him to hear us as opposed to ignore us. We want him to have that right relationship. So the forgiveness is required for the right relationship, not forgiveness in the sense of, okay, well, now I'll get off and I'll be able to go do what I want to do again. Right. So
return to our vomit, right?
Yeah.
Well, and then he presents it toward the end there. It's like, as you do this, whenever you show this kind of forgiveness to your people and you bring them back as needed, then the nation of the earth will recognize that there in verse 60.
Yeah.
And they'll be drawn to you.
Yep. You're renowned. And it's the same thing mentioned in 41, with the foreigners, the Gentiles, when they come in and they hear and they seek you, basically, they come for your name's sake. We're seeing again the renown of God being known around the world. I mean, that's the cause of Israel. Like that was the point of Israel and making them a nation in the first place, that all nations will be blessed through them.
Yeah.
Yep.
I really like the contrast of, what Solomon is praying here versus what all the other nations would have done. And so verse 27, God does not really live on earth. Look, if the sky and the highest heavens cannot contain you, how much less this temple I have built, essentially will contain you. Everywhere else had their God in the temple. And Solomon said, he's humbly asking, Lord, will you fill this temple? I know that it cannot contain you. But Lord, if we know you are here, we know that you are faithful to your covenant, essentially, basically what he's saying. And I just love the humility in that.
Yeah.
Because, God didn't have to, but he is faithful and he did.
It's great that this is so God-centered too. Well, we mentioned it already, but he makes a plea for who God is and about the character of God and how he's faithful. And he ends on that too. He says, not one word has failed of all of his good promises.
Right.
May he not leave us or forsake us, and may he incline his ears or incline our hearts to him. And so I see that too, as the presence of God is the motivation and is also the cause of us inclining our hearts towards him. So without God, we would not incline our hearts to him. Left to ourselves, as James often reminds us, then we're gonna go off the deep end ultimately. But all the peoples of the Lord, or of the earth, may know that the Lord is God and there is no other.
That brings us up to chapter 10, and I love this chapter. I don't know why. I like the fact that the Queen of Sheba comes and verifies all of this and gives us her experience there that's beyond what we could imagine. Basically, is what her takeaway from everything she sees in the house of Solomon and the reign of Solomon and the wisdom of Solomon is just so next level that she would have never guessed it to be that great. Is basically her takeaway. What are y'all seeing in that?
Left her speechless.
Yeah.
So the prophets and scribes and priests, whoever was compiling the scroll for the kings, I saw it as, hey, they not only is Israel doing great by Israel standards, the Queen of Sheba herself came up and verified this with her own eyes, and so this is her testimony of that. And so I see it as like, hey, there's more. Yeah. It's not just us. We're not just making this up.
Right. So she clarifies that Israel is at this point in time the envy of the nations.
Yeah.
Which was the point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and it's the same type of idea. God is able to do far exceedingly more, abundantly more than we can ever dream or imagine. And this idea here is she thought she had something in mind. She had the reports and the testimonies, if you will. And then she saw it, and she's like, man, this is not even half of it.
Yeah.
And if we can, part of our prayer should be, God, open our eyes to be able to see more than just half of it, I guess. And heaven will always bring us more. That's one of those things that we hold our hope in too, is that if God is doing this just for a portion of time for Israel and to make his name great, then how much more is he going to do as time goes on and as the world knows and, history keeps going. So,
yeah. And
because the Lord loved Israel forever.
Again, and we can look at this as just a small snippet of what's to come. I mean, God just showing us just a touch of what he can do. And then he told us of a touch of what he's, eyes not seen, ears not heard, nor has it entered to the heart of man, right? We cannot even imagine what he has prepared for those who love him.
Yeah.
Chapter 11?
I think so.
That's where it all comes down.
Where it turns the page right here.
And then we're like, we got to take a breath.
The
we're like, oh man.
of the end.
You have it right there in the first verse. Yeah. Solomon loved many foreign women. And we understand that, first of all, this was not commanded, the multiple women, but especially not foreign women. That was not just to the king, that was to all of Israel.
Right.
And especially the leadership of Israel would certainly be included. And it wasn't even just many. Like when we look down and we read and we're like 700 and 300, that's more than what we would think is many. Many would be like, okay, he had like 10 or 12 is where I'd go many.
Yeah.
Not 700 and 300.
No. 100's outrageous.
Yeah.
1,000 is next level.
Yeah.
So Solomon did nothing in moderation. We could definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
And so some things that should have been done in moderation, he did not.
In verse 4, it says, when Solomon was old and his wives turned his heart after other gods. I kind of feel like, okay, so if Solomon was holding out, you can do that with, let's say, even a few of the wives. But I mean, if you got all these, let's even just knock out all the concubines. And let's just say that he's got even let's say a seventh of the number of wives that he's got that he actually cares about and loves. And then it's like, okay, you got 100 different women that are trying to pull you all these different ways. He's tired of it. He's like, oh, all right, just whatever. Just build your stuff. I'll give you the money, whatever.
I'll sign
it
it. It's here.
Yeah.
Go build your high place.
Yeah.
These people are at your care. Tell them what you want.
But it kept his heart from God.
Someone did the math. If he accumulated a new woman over his 40 years of reign, it was basically a new woman every 2 weeks.
That's crazy.
That's just spreading them out across 40 years. So, I'm sure there was some shorter windows in there.
Maybe.
But it's wild.
Some short honeymoons. It's like, well, in 1 week you have a honeymoon, and the next week you're looking for the next one.
Yeah.
I mean,
and some of these were probably purely political alliances.
I'm sure.
And some were like, hey, that's a pretty woman. Let me have her. Yeah. It's just crazy.
Well, and so we kind of see a similar pattern here that we saw with Saul, King Saul, where Solomon's heart goes away from God, and God sends the prophet to speak to somebody else and like, hey, I'm giving the kingdom to you, which is what basically happened with David. And so this is definitely a sad turn in a single generation from the peak of their existence to we're going to divide the kingdom.
It's interesting throughout this chapter 11, especially the second half of it. It's like, man, so Solomon knew God, like he had to have, not only within all the Proverbs that we see, not only just in Ecclesiastes and everything there, but I mean, he appeared to him twice, it said, and had commanded him concerning this thing. So he knows better. It's not like he could get around it any other way, but it's become his practice to turn after other gods and stuff. But he also, just the complexity of, he says, well, I'm not, since for the sake of your father David, I'm not going to take the kingdom from you. I'll take it from your son. And so we see grace and mercy. And he's like, not only that, but I will also leave one tribe to your son.
Right.
And so, we just see a lot of God's steadfast love, if you will. And he's faithful to his promises, not only to David, but also to the kingdom, the Israelites in general. So it's Hadad or Hadad.
Hey,
Dad. He's the one that wanted or got the Pharaoh's wife's sister.
Right.
In-law.
Yep.
So he got strong, and then he came against, but he wasn't the only one. God also raised up in verse 23.
Raison.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He
There
was
you go.
French. Billy would have appreciated that. So he loathed Israel. That's all right. There's a definite enemy right there. And again, it's interesting that he's in Syria. We're not going to take anything away from that for today's scenarios, but it's interesting. Then we got Jeroboam.
Yeah.
Now, this is not necessarily an enemy of the state, but somebody that is selected to succeed for the 10 tribes.
So he's made king over Israel in the north, and then Rehoboam will be in the south.
Which we have to remember that this was ordained by God still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so again, true to some of King Saul's reign, Solomon tries to kill this man. He's been chosen to be king over the 10 tribes, and Solomon puts a crosshair on him. It's interesting.
Yeah. But he can't.
No. Still, that's a bad look. For a man who started off so great. And we see that as we go track through the kings. We see some others that start off so great and end up, consumed with worms or foot disease, or some weird thing happens to them just because somewhere along the way they turn a corner and it's no longer for God. And so it's, again, there's cautionary tales and a lot of these kings we're about to read through that man, I just want to finish strong. Yeah, it's one thing to start strong, but finishing strong seems to be the difficulty for a lot of the kings.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is definitely true for all of us.
Yeah. Solomon passes away, buried in the city with his father David. His son Rehoboam replaces him as king, but again, this is just going to be over Judah, and so we'll see that play out starting in chapter 12.
Yep. That's where we'll pick up next time.
Any other deep thoughts from the vast storehouse of knowledge over here?
No.
Cool. And that
it's not very
That's
deep.
a wrap.
it is not. No, it's we walked through it, and we'll walk through some more next time. Until then, shalom.